I haven't got the reassurance I need to make sure all those things are going to be in place for October and onwards, and will be monitored effectively by a probation service that is still on its knees, still struggling, and a workforce. Does it have, the capacity to deal with managing all this risk that's coming out into the community?
The Times understands that some members of Asian grooming gangs who abused girls in northern England may be freed from prison early, despite the Prime Minister's pledge to exclude grooming offences from the government's early release scheme. The news comes as the widow of PC Andrew Harper, Lissy Harper, called the failure to block the early release of her husband's killers a gut punch and an unforgivable decision. The Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, Claire Waxman, says victims have been left enduring weeks of stress and uncertainty. And she joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, as I mentioned there, The Times is reporting today that some of those convicted of grooming, in one case of a 13-year-old girl, will be freed early. How has this been allowed to happen?
Well, the big issue right now is obviously lots of things are coming out into the media, but victims themselves who were first notified in mid-June, so thousands of victims and families across the country in mid-June were notified very poorly that their offender in their case may well be released early. They've had no other information since. So what they're hearing is lots of things being reported in the media, and I think things are just not clear enough. They desperately need clarity. That's why I've been pushing government and the Ministry of Justice every day to say, when are we getting communication out to victims? Because victims need to know, is the offender in my case coming out? If so, when? And what's being done to safeguard me and my family and keep us safe? That's what's really critical and what's needed now.
I can hear in the tone of your voice that there is some frustration there, and you've obviously been trying to get the Ministry of Justice and others to be more clear about this. Do you have, as we speak today, a list of offences that are included and how it breaks down in terms of who will and who won't be included in the early release scheme?
So government published the list of exemptions, excluded offences on Tuesday night. So that's now published on their website, and there's a long list of offences. But what makes that very tricky for victims and for others to work out is that you have offenders who've been convicted for maybe different offences. So it's a very complex piece of work that's now needed for probation and prison staff to work out who's coming out when. And that's why the communication to victims is going to take time, which is leaving them, unfortunately, in the most desperate of situations, because nobody is really clear who's exempt, who is coming out when, and what's going to happen. And that's why I've been pushing government. We have to get on top of this and work at pace. And what's really needed, so I originally called for government to pause this, review this. I put out a number of lists in the letter when it was Minister Timpson to say, these are the things that I need reassurance about. So whilst I welcome they listened and they did a review, of course it's not gone far enough for the family of PC Harper, for all the victims that are contacting me of, non-recent child sex abuse, domestic abuse, stalking. There are so many victims and families that fall outside of these exemptions. That's why my focus has to be, come October, whether I like it or not, and I don't, offenders are going to be released early into the community, and I'm going to have victims greatly impacted. They need clarity, they need support, and most importantly, they need robust safeguards in place to keep them and their families safe. That's the work that has to happen. And I'm worried because although it's been delayed till October, it's still not a huge amount of time.
Do you have faith that those safeguards will be in place to protect victims and survivors, as you say?
Not currently, no, because it's October and there's a huge amount of work that has to happen. Firstly, they need to let victims know if the offender in the case is coming out. They also then need to start working with that victim to understand what concerns and risks they may have. That needs to feed into robust risk assessments. Then they need to work out exclusion zones, and that's often a back and forth process. Victims saying, I want them to be excluded from this area. That then has to go back to the offender managers and back to probation and prison. So there's it's a bit of a long process. That's only just on exclusion zones. What I've been trying to get clarity about as well, and what victims need, is we were given a lot of reassurance when this legislation was going through Parliament that there would be enhanced supervision, there would be these restriction zones, which meant you would lock in offenders, not the victims, and curb their freedoms, tagging, which we know is often it's a false sense of security. It's not a shield. It's not going to protect victims. It's only as good as someone who's actively monitoring it, and if we see an active and quick response to breaches. So for me, I haven't got the reassurance I need to make sure all those things are going to be in place for October and onwards, and will be monitored effectively by a probation service that is still on its knees, still struggling, and a workforce. Does it have the capacity to deal with managing all this risk that's coming out into the community and into public space? I don't know at this present time, and so I have lots of concerns, but I am very much talking to government on a daily basis about these concerns and pushing them as hard as I can.
And what is your perception of the way that this government is dealing with this issue? Is it any different? Is it any better than the previous Starmer administration?
It is better. I have seen some hope here, because I had been involved in these discussions since the beginning, since I came into this role in January. I was round the table with Minister Timpson, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, and others from Probation, talking about these issues, and I never got a sense that there was any real leadership or any grip. And that's why I called for the pause in early July, because I was so concerned. I have to say, since the new Prime Minister, since Andy Burnham has come in, I do feel listened to. We have much more engagement. We're able to be involved in the conversation. So I feel like there is a shift and they are listening. What is still missing is real grip. And when I say grip, this is such a huge and risky piece of work. It needs ministerial oversight. It needs a task force. It needs all the different agencies around the table working together around the clock for October. And I haven't seen that yet. And I think we have to.
Given what you've just said, was it the right time for the Prime Minister to take a holiday?
I mean, I can't comment on that. It is August. There are lots of people that I'm currently working with that are now away. It's I think, terrible time. I mean, that's why I was relieved that it's moved from September to October. If the prison numbers allowed, it should be moved even further. But sadly, I'm told if we don't go for October, we're already going to struggle and we're going to run out of prison space by November. So should he have gone away? I mean, I think he's in regular contact. I really can't comment on that. All I need to know from the Prime Minister is that there is ministerial oversight urgently, and that we are bringing every agency that has got to do this work, can't just fall on probation. It's prison, it's policing, it's courts. Everyone has to sit around the table. This is an emergency response, and victims and the public desperately need this.
Claire Waxman, Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, thank you for your time on the programme this morning.